Blood trickled from Marcus Jackson's knuckles as two men lay sprawled across his manicured lawn. Neighbors recorded with phones while his wife Ayana sobbed, her cheeks swollen. Sirens wailed closer. 3 months in this upscale Florida community, and already their American dream had become a nightmare. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever experienced HOA drama, and subscribe for more true stories of injustice and triumph. Now let's discover how an elite Navy SEAL was forced to protect his family from the very people who claimed to protect their community. Marcus and Ayana Jackson had spent their entire marriage dreaming of a home like this one in Palmwood Shores, the exclusive waterfront community in Sarasota, Florida. After 15 years of Marcus's dangerous deployments as a Navy SEAL and Ayana's dedicated work teaching English literature at underfunded schools, they had finally saved enough for the down payment. Marcus's security consulting business had taken off after retirement from active duty, with high-profile clients valuing his tactical expertise and unwavering calm under pressure. The pristine streets, lined with royal palms and immaculate Mediterranean-style homes, represented everything they had worked for their entire lives. Their realtor, a bubbly blonde woman named Stephanie, had assured them Palmwood Shores was the perfect place to settle down with exceptional schools, low crime rates, and a tight-knit community. What Stephanie conveniently failed to mention was that the Jacksons would be only the third black family to move into the 128-home development in its 20-year history. The first warning sign appeared the very day they moved in, when multiple neighbors peered through curtains rather than offering welcome greetings. At the neighborhood pool the following weekend, conversation stopped when Marcus and Ayana approached, resuming in hushed tones once they passed. "They're just getting to know us," Ayana reassured Marcus, always the optimistic one. "Once they see we're hard-working professionals like them, everything will be fine." 3 days after moving in, they received their official welcome from Eleanor Harrington, the 60-something president of the Palmwood Shores Homeowners Association. Eleanor arrived unannounced, clipboard in hand pearl necklace gleaming against her pastel twin set. "We like to ensure new residents understand our community standards," she explained, eyes scanning their living room furniture as if taking inventory. "I must say you both are so articulate. What a refreshing surprise." Marcus felt Ayana's hand tighten around their practice signal when encountering thinly veiled racism. "Princeton for undergrad and Georgetown for my master's tends to help with articulation," Ayana responded with a tight smile. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly before continuing her inspection of their home, pointing out various HOA regulations with particular emphasis on exterior appearance. "We pride ourselves on Palmwood Shores' reputation and property values," she concluded. "Some people simply aren't suited for our community standards." The implied threat lingered after she left. The next morning, Marcus discovered a note in their mailbox. "Palmwood Shores has maintained certain standards for 20 years. You might be more comfortable elsewhere." When he showed it to Ayana, her optimism finally faltered. "I deal with microaggressions at work every day, but this is our home, Marcus. It's supposed to be our sanctuary." That evening, Marcus installed a comprehensive security system, including cameras covering every angle of their property. His military instincts for perimeter security proved prescient when they awoke to find their custom mailbox vandalized, the hand-painted design Ayana had created smeared with an unidentifiable substance. The security footage revealed a hooded figure at 3 a.m, face carefully angled away from cameras. 1 week later, their first official HOA violation notice appeared on their door for unapproved landscape modifications, specifically the yellow hibiscus plants Ayana had planted along their walkway. Marcus photographed identical plants at 3 neighboring homes, all owned by white residents, none with violation notices. At the community center, Marcus met Walter Thompson, a middle-aged black financial advisor who approached him while Eleanor was distracted across the room. "Watch yourself with Eleanor," Walter whispered. 3 black families moved in before you. 2 sold within 6 months after endless harassment. My family has stayed 5 years, but only because my wife's a civil rights attorney who documents everything. Eleanor doesn't want us here, and she has methods of getting her way." Marcus nodded his tactical mind, already calculating this new battlefield's parameters. "Thanks for the warning, but Ayana and I earned our place here. We won't be intimidated out of our own home." Walter's expression remained grave. "That's what we all said at first. Just be prepared. It gets worse before it gets better, if it gets better at all." Ayana secured her teaching position at prestigious Palmwood Preparatory Academy. Before they'd even closed on their house, her exceptional credentials and teaching awards, making her a standout candidate. The private school catered to the community's wealthiest families, including several board members from neighboring HOAs. Her initial excitement quickly gave way to discomfort as she encountered subtle challenges to her authority. "Are you certain that's the correct interpretation of Ellison's Invisible Man?" questioned Mrs. Whitmore, a parent with no teaching background, during the first curriculum night. "My Harvard professor had quite a different analysis." Another parent asked directly about Ayana's qualifications, despite the detailed biography on the school website highlighting her master's degree and multiple teaching excellence awards. Meanwhile, Marcus found a fresh HOA violation notice on their door every Thursday morning, meticulously documenting infractions from excessive holiday decorations, a single autumn wreath, to improper waste bin placement positioned identically to their neighbors' bins. Each violation carried increasingly substantial fines. When they hosted a small backyard barbecue for Marcus's former SEAL teammates, an HOA representative appeared at 6:30, precisely citing noise complaints. The representative left without addressing the much louder pool party happening 3 doors down, where Eleanor herself was in attendance. "This is deliberate harassment," Marcus stated flatly, collecting the violation notice for his growing documentation file. One bright spot emerged when Ayana befriended Carmen Rodriguez, the Hispanic school counselor who experienced similar treatment. "They've been trying to find reasons to dismiss me for 2 years. Carmen confided during lunch. "Be careful with your department head, Victoria. She reports everything directly to board members connected with Eleanor." Ayana began noticing Victoria hovering outside her classroom door during lessons, taking notes with a critical expression. The situation at home grew increasingly uncomfortable when Marcus discovered through his security cameras that unmarked vehicles were slowly driving by their property multiple times, daily occupants photographing their home from different angles. The community pool incident pushed Ayana to her breaking point. Dressed in a modest one-piece swimsuit with a swim skirt, she was publicly confronted by Eleanor about inappropriate attire not meeting community standards. Multiple white women lounged nearby in significantly more revealing bikinis without comment. Marcus witnessed Ayana's humiliation from across the pool deck, where he'd been chatting with other veterans. The barely contained rage in his expression caused several nearby residents to nervously gather their belongings. That evening, while attending the community summer gathering, Marcus overheard a neighbor refer to their street as going downhill since the diversity quota kicked in. The confrontation that followed created a palpable tension throughout the event, with residents quickly choosing sides. Eleanor used the incident to send a community-wide email about maintaining civil discourse and respecting Palmwood Shore's traditions. The escalation continued when they discovered their car vandalized in their driveway, a racial slur keyed into the paint. By the time police arrived, the slur had been mysteriously painted over with a different color of paint, leaving only trace evidence. Neighborhood pranks the responding officer dismissed, refusing to take fingerprints or check nearby security cameras. "This is an HOA matter, not a police issue." Marcus recognized the deliberate undermining of evidence and began implementing full military-grade documentation protocols, creating a comprehensive security perimeter around their home. "We're under siege," he told Ayana as they reviewed security footage together, "and I'm done playing defense." The calculated campaign against them became undeniable when Ayana received her first negative teaching evaluation despite glowing student reviews. The evaluation cited concerns about cultural perspectives potentially creating divisiveness in her literature selections, specifically her unit on Ralph Ellison, Toni Morrison, and James Baldwin. The same day, Marcus lost 2 major security contracts after clients received anonymous emails questioning his stability and mental health following his military service. "They're attacking our livelihoods now," Ayana observed quietly. "They want us broke and gone." Marcus's expression hardened with resolve. "Then it's time to identify the entire enemy force and develop counterintelligence. This isn't just Eleanor, it's an organized campaign with multiple players." Walter's warnings echoed in his mind as Marcus began mapping connections between the HOA board school administration and local officials. The pattern of harassment was too coordinated for a single person. Someone with significant resources wanted them gone, and Eleanor was merely the visible enforcer. What does it take to break a Navy SEAL? Eleanor Harrington and her associates were about to find out exactly how the wrong man they had targeted. Marcus began his investigation with methodical precision, utilizing skills honed through years of high-stakes military intelligence operations. He started with Eleanor Harrington herself, calling in a favor from his former Navy intelligence specialist to run a comprehensive background check. The results revealed Eleanor's previous employment with Coastal Development Partners, a company with multiple discrimination lawsuits settled out of court over the past decade. Every lawsuit involved minority homeowners in communities scheduled for revitalization projects. The pattern was unmistakable once laid bare. Meanwhile, Ayana's professional life became increasingly hostile. Opening her faculty mailbox one morning, she discovered a typewritten note reading simply, "Know your place or lose it." When she reported the threat to administration, the principal suggested it might be workplace stress, causing her to overreact to ordinary communication. Marcus advised her to document everything but proceed cautiously while their investigation continued. Are you finding this unbelievable? Comment number 1. If you've experienced discrimination in your neighborhood or workplace, hit that like button if you think everyone deserves to feel safe in their own home, and subscribe for more stories of people standing against injustice. Have you ever noticed how certain communities seem designed to keep some people out? Let's continue exploring what Marcus discovered next. Working methodically through his contacts, Marcus arranged a secret meeting with Walter Thompson and 4 other minority residents from nearby communities. They gathered at a coffee shop 10 miles from Palmwood Shores, where Marcus learned their experiences mirrored his own with frightening accuracy. "First come the petty violations," explained Darren Washington, a black doctor who had eventually sold his home at a loss. "Then your kids get excluded from activities. Next, they go after your professional reputation." Walter nodded solemnly. "Then mysterious property damage that's never investigated properly. It's a playbook they've perfected." Letitia Coleman, who still lived in a neighboring community, added Eleanor's "just the public face." "The real power is Jeffrey Palmer of Palmer Development Group. They want our properties for a massive commercial complex, but they need 80% of homeowners to approve. Guess which homes they pressure to sell?" First, Marcus compiled a timeline, revealing a disturbing pattern. Every minority family that moved in faced escalating harassment until they sold, usually at a loss with Palmer Development subsidiaries, frequently purchasing the properties through shell companies. Further investigation revealed Eleanor's connections to Judge William Harrington, her brother-in-law, who presided over multiple cases involving HOA disputes. Additionally, Police Captain Robert Schaefer, who oversaw the district including Palmwood Shores, regularly golfed with Eleanor's husband and had received campaign donations from Palmer Development for his failed county commissioner run. The web of influence extended throughout the local power structure. Ayana faced her own crisis when she arrived at school to find her classroom vandalized with racial slurs scrawled across her carefully created educational posters. The principal blamed teenagers playing pranks despite the school's sophisticated security system mysteriously malfunctioning only in the hallway outside her classroom during the incident. Marcus confronted the principal directly, his imposing presence and calm, measured tone, making it clear that the dismissive attitude toward his wife's safety was unacceptable. The nervous administrator agreed to install additional security cameras in Ayana's classroom. When they received notice of $5,000 in accumulated HOA fines for various minor violations, Marcus used his real estate contacts to research property records. The discovery confirmed Letitia's warning. Palmer Development had been systematically acquiring properties throughout Palmwood Shores, focusing particularly on their block. The Jacksons contacted civil rights attorney Lisa Chen, who reviewed their documentation with growing concern. "This is textbook violation of the Fair Housing Act," she confirmed. "The coordinated nature of the harassment, the discriminatory enforcement of HOA, rules the professional retaliation. It shows a pattern of illegal housing discrimination. But these cases are difficult to prove without extensive documentation." Marcus gestured to his meticulously organized evidence. "Documentation is what SEALs do best. We never enter a situation without knowing exactly what we're up against." Lisa's expression remained grave. "You're up against people with connections throughout the county. This won't be easy, and it will get worse before it gets better." Marcus's smile contained no humor. "That's what they're counting on, but they've never gone up against someone who was trained to operate behind enemy lines. Have you ever wondered how far corrupt officials will go to protect their interests? What would you do if you discovered your entire community was built on discrimination and greed?" Comment number 1. If you believe we need stronger laws against housing discrimination, let's watch what happens when Marcus discovers exactly how deep the corruption in Palmwood Shores really goes. The community newsletter announced the creation of the Palmwood Shores Community Standards Enforcement Division with a color photograph showing 4 men in khaki uniforms standing at attention beside Eleanor. The announcement described them as authorized enforcement officers who would ensure community standards are maintained through regular patrols and violation documentation. Marcus immediately recognized the intentional visual similarity to law enforcement, from the badge-shaped patches on their shoulders to the citation books visible in their hands. What the newsletter carefully avoided stating was any actual legal authority these men possessed, because they had none. "This is dangerously close to impersonating law enforcement," Marcus noted, as he showed Ayana the newsletter. "They're deliberately creating confusion between private security and actual police powers." His suspicions were confirmed when he contacted the sheriff's department and confirmed no special authorization had been granted to the HOA for enforcement activities. These officers had no more legal authority than any other private citizen, yet they were presenting themselves with all the visual trappings of official law enforcement. Within days, the patrols began with marked particular focus on homes owned by minority residents and those who had spoken up at HOA meetings. Ayana experienced their intimidation firsthand when driving home from school. A vehicle with community enforcement emblazoned on the side followed her from the community entrance to their driveway, parking directly behind her car. 2 uniformed men approached as she gathered her teaching materials. "Ma'am, we need to document several violations regarding your property." Landscaping announced the taller man, hand resting suggestively near what appeared to be a holstered weapon beneath his jacket. "You'll need to sign this citation, acknowledging receipt." When Ayana questioned their authority, the men became increasingly aggressive, standing uncomfortably close and speaking over her attempts to call Marcus. Only the arrival of a neighbor walking their dog caused them to retreat with warnings of legal consequences for obstruction of community standards enforcement. Shaken Ayana called Marcus immediately. His call to local police yielded a frustrating response. "This is a civil HOA matter outside our jurisdiction. If they're not breaking any laws, there's nothing we can do." Using his security contacts, Marcus ran background checks on all 4 enforcement officers. His discovery of assault records and white supremacist group affiliations for one officer, Dwayne Miller, confirmed his worst suspicions. These weren't just overzealous security guards, they were deliberately selected for intimidation purposes. The financial assault continued alongside the intimidation tactics. Eleanor orchestrated special assessment fees targeting specific streets, notably those with minority homeowners, citing necessary infrastructure improvements. The $5,000 assessment was due in 30 days with threats of liens against properties for non-payment. Marcus expanded their home security system, further installing military-grade surveillance equipment and beginning counter-surveillance operations to document the officers' activities throughout the neighborhood. His cameras captured them, focusing almost exclusively on minority-owned homes, conducting surveillance at odd hours, and occasionally tampering with personal property like garden decorations and mailboxes, always just out of view of homeowners' security cameras, but visible to Marcus's comprehensive system. Ayana's professional situation deteriorated further when she received a negative teaching evaluation containing language suspiciously similar to complaints Eleanor had made about the Jacksons at HOA meetings. The connection between the school board and HOA leadership became undeniable when the evaluation cited concerns about Ayana's culturally divisive curriculum choices, the exact phrasing Eleanor had used in a community newsletter, the Crop 7 at HOA. Previous week. The coordinated nature of the attack became even clearer when 3 of Marcus's security consulting clients canceled their contracts within the same week, each citing anonymous concerns about his reliability. Investigation revealed all 3 clients had connections to Palmer Development through various business relationships. "They're trying to financially break us," Marcus observed grimly as they reviewed their rapidly dwindling savings. "Force us to sell by attacking our income sources while manufacturing expenses through fines and assessments." Ayana squeezed his hand. "They don't know who they're dealing with. We've overcome worse." Marcus nodded, his tactical mind already formulating counter-strategies. "Their biggest mistake was making this personal. Now we know exactly what we're fighting." That evening, as Marcus reviewed security footage, he captured clear evidence of the enforcement officers photographing homes, peering through windows and testing door handles under cover of darkness. Most disturbing was footage of Dwayne Miller pausing near their bedroom window for several minutes, speaking into a radio while watching Ayana prepare for bed. Marcus's expression hardened as he saved the footage to his growing evidence file. The harassment had crossed from discrimination into potentially criminal territory. The sophistication of the operation confirmed Marcus's suspicion that Eleanor's influence extended throughout the community's power structure. This wasn't merely neighborhood prejudice, it was an organized campaign with significant resources behind it. "We need allies," Marcus told Ayana as they reviewed their documentation. "And we need to expose the entire operation, not just Eleanor. Someone's funding this, and Eleanor's just their public face." Their opportunity to gather allies would come sooner than expected at the emergency HOA meeting Eleanor had called to discuss the declining community standards and necessary enforcement actions. Marcus prepared meticulously for the confrontation, knowing it would mark a turning point in their resistance. The community clubhouse overflowed with Palmwood Shores residents for the emergency HOA meeting. Marcus and Ayana arrived early, strategically selecting seats with clear sightlines to both exits and the board table. Eleanor opened the meeting with a 20-minute presentation about maintaining community standards and property values, accompanied by slides showing examples of violations, predominantly photographs of homes owned by minority residents, including the Jacksons. Marcus noted several white residents shifting uncomfortably as the targeted nature of the presentation became increasingly obvious. When the meeting finally opened for resident comments, Eleanor announced a new procedural rule. To ensure efficiency, residents must submit questions in writing for board review before receiving microphone privileges. This transparent attempt to control the narrative backfired when Ayana stood despite not being recognized. "Point of order," she stated firmly, her years of classroom management evident in her commanding tone. HOA Bylaws, Section 4.3, specifically guarantees all residents speaking privileges at open meetings with no pre-approval requirements. A murmur spread through the crowd as Eleanor's face tightened. Before she could respond, Ayana continued, "I'd like to address the disparate enforcement of community standards." Eleanor immediately cut Ayana's microphone, her voice brittle as she announced, "We're following modified emergency procedures due to time constraints." The room tensed as Marcus stood beside his wife, his imposing presence drawing all eyes. "My wife was speaking," he stated, his voice carrying clearly without amplification. "And we have documentation of discriminatory enforcement that every resident should hear." Eleanor frantically signaled to security, but the confrontation had already captivated the audience. An unexpected voice broke the tension. "Let them speak," called Catherine Wilkins, an elderly white resident who had lived in Palmwood Shores since its founding. "I've watched what's happening to the Jacksons, and it's shameful. Several other voices joined in support, creating a moment of opportunity Marcus had been waiting for. As security hesitated, torn between Eleanor's gestures and the crowd's growing insistence, Marcus connected his laptop to the projection system and displayed a simple spreadsheet. "This shows every HOA violation issued in the past 6 months," he explained calmly. "Minority households represent 15% of the community, but received 68% of all violations. The data speaks for itself." The revelation created an instant division among residents, some expressing shock while others defended the HOA's actions. In that charged atmosphere, unexpected allies emerged. Catherine Wilkins and several other longtime residents publicly supported the Jacksons' right to fair treatment. Richard Gonzalez, who had remained silent about his own experiences with discrimination, shared similar violation notices he'd received. By meeting's end, a small but determined coalition had formed, exchanging contact information and agreeing to share documentation. Eleanor's retaliation came swiftly. Patrols by the fake enforcement officers doubled around coalition members' homes with particular focus on the Jacksons' property. Catherine Wilkins found her prize-winning roses mysteriously dying 2 days after speaking out. Richard Gonzalez's teenage son was stopped and questioned by officers while walking their dog. Marcus anticipated the escalation, contacting his former SEAL teammates for assistance. Within days, a sophisticated surveillance operation monitored Eleanor's activities and documented the fake officers' harassment. Using military-grade equipment, they captured clandestine meetings between Eleanor Jeffrey Palmer of Palmer Development and several local officials, including a judge and police captain. Most damning was audio of Eleanor instructing the enforcement officers to focus on problem residents with specific mention of coalition members' addresses. The operation revealed the true scope of the conspiracy. Palmer Development had plans for a luxury resort complex encompassing the exact area where minority residents were concentrated. County permit applications had been filed months earlier, suggesting the discrimination campaign had been planned well in advance. Marcus approached FBI agent Dawson, a former military colleague, now working in the Civil Rights Division. While unable to officially open an investigation without additional evidence, Dawson provided guidance on documentation requirements for federal housing discrimination cases. "You need to establish clear patterns and direct connections," Dawson advised. "Record everything, get witnesses willing to testify, follow money trails if possible." The unofficial federal interest in the case somehow leaked to Eleanor, who immediately increased pressure on coalition members. Ayana's supporters at school found themselves assigned to difficult classes or overlooked for committee positions. Catherine Wilkins received notice that her garden violated multiple HOA regulations despite winning community beautification awards for 15 consecutive years. Coalition members began receiving foreclosure threats based on accumulated fines for fabricated violations. The escalation only strengthened the coalition's resolve. They established secure communication channels, shared documentation protocols, and implemented a neighborhood watch system to counter the fake officers' intimidation. Marcus organized weekly strategy meetings, teaching coalition members surveillance countermeasures and evidence collection techniques. "We're not just fighting for our homes anymore," Catherine Wilkins observed during one meeting. "We're fighting for what kind of community Palmwood Shores will be." The sentiment resonated with coalition members, transforming their individual grievances into a united stand against discrimination. As pressure mounted, Marcus received concerning intelligence from his surveillance team. Eleanor had been recorded discussing more aggressive tactics to solve the problem permanently. The vague threat acquired urgency when Marcus's security system detected unauthorized attempts to access their property at 3 a.m. The confrontation was escalating toward a dangerous inflection point, with Eleanor growing increasingly desperate as the coalition strengthened. "They're panicking," Marcus told Ayana as they reviewed the latest surveillance reports, "which makes them more dangerous, but also more likely to make mistakes. We need to be ready when they do." What motivates someone to systematically target families based on their race? As Marcus and his team intensified their surveillance operation on Eleanor Harrington and her associates, the true scope of the conspiracy began to emerge from the Devon PC. Shadows. Using equipment borrowed from his SEAL teammates, Marcus documented a clandestine meeting between Eleanor and Jeffrey Palmer at an upscale restaurant 20 miles from Palmwood Shores. Their conversation, captured through directional microphones, revealed the developer's frustration with the pace of property acquisitions. "We need 80% ownership by next quarter, or we lose the international investors," Palmer hissed across their secluded table. "Your job was to clear out the undesirables quickly and quietly." Eleanor's response chilled Marcus as he reviewed the recording later. "My methods work, Jeffrey. We forced out 36 families in 5 years without a single successful discrimination claim. The Jackson situation is merely a temporary setback." The conversation confirmed what they had suspected. This wasn't merely neighborhood racism, but a calculated business strategy with substantial financial motives. Further surveillance revealed meetings between Palmer and various county officials, including building inspectors and zoning administrators. Documents exchanged during these meetings, photographed by Marcus's team using telephoto lenses, included drafts of permit applications for Palmwood Harbor Resort and Marina, a luxury complex encompassing the exact section of the Wrenchen community where minority residents were concentrated. Most disturbing was evidence of payments flowing from Palmer Development shell companies to personal accounts belonging to local officials who had dismissed complaints against the HOA. The connection to Police Captain Richard Taylor became clear when Marcus documented a meeting where Taylor received an envelope from Palmer, later verified to contain $10,000 in cash. The same evening, Taylor issued a departmental directive classifying HOA disputes as low-priority response incidents. Have you ever wondered how corruption infects an entire community? Comment number 1, if you believe these officials should face criminal charges. Like this video if you're inspired by people who stand up against powerful adversaries, and subscribe to follow more stories of justice prevailing against overwhelming odds. What would you do if you discovered the officials sworn to protect you were actually enabling discrimination? Let's see how Ayana's situation at school connects to this larger conspiracy. While Marcus uncovered the financial conspiracy, Ayana faced increasing hostility at Palmwood Preparatory Academy. After teaching an acclaimed lesson on Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, she returned to find her vehicle vandalized in the staff parking lot, the word "leave" scratched into the paint. When she reported the incident, security footage from that section of the parking lot had been accidentally erased during routine system maintenance. The school's dismissive response changed dramatically when Marcus appeared the following day, accompanied by their attorney Lisa Chen and a private investigator who photographed the damage. Within hours, the school board chairman personally called to apologize and promise a full investigation. Marcus seized the momentum by addressing the school board directly at their next meeting, presenting evidence connecting board members to Eleanor Harrington and Palmer Development through various business relationships and social payson. Marcus seized the Parcus connections. The public revelation of these connections forced several board members to recuse themselves from decisions involving Ayana's employment. Meanwhile, the coalition members meticulously documented every instance of discriminatory enforcement, creating an overwhelming body of evidence showing the targeted nature of HOA actions. Their documentation revealed minority homeowners were 34 times more likely to receive violation notices than white residents, with fines averaging 3 times higher for identical infractions. FBI agent Dawson reviewed their evidence with growing concern. "There's definitely federal interest here," he confirmed, during a confidential meeting with Marcus and Ayana. "This appears to be systematic housing discrimination connected to corruption. But we need absolute proof connecting all parties before we can move officially." That proof arrived unexpectedly when one coalition member's security camera captured Dwayne Miller, the most aggressive enforcement officer, placing a tracking device on their vehicle. The discovery prompted Marcus to check coalition members' homes and vehicles, revealing sophisticated surveillance equipment installed without consent. Agent Dawson's interest intensified significantly with this evidence of potential federal wiretapping violations. The conspiracy took a darker turn when Catherine Wilkins' home mysteriously caught fire after she spoke at a county commission meeting about HOA abuses. Though officially ruled accidental, Marcus's team discovered evidence of tampering with her electrical system. The incident galvanized the coalition, with Marcus installing protective measures around vulnerable members' homes and organizing volunteer security patrols. Ayana, meanwhile, built support among her fellow teachers, many of whom had witnessed the targeted pressure against her. When the administration attempted to place her on probation for curriculum concerns, 15 faculty members submitted a joint letter defending her teaching methods and highlighting the suspicious timing of complaints. The collective action forced the administration to retreat, revealing cracks in the previously united front against her. In his most significant discovery, Marcus uncovered evidence of offshore accounts receiving regular payments from Palmer Development, including one registered to Eleanor Harrington in the Cayman Islands. The financial trail connected directly to bribes paid to local officials, creating a comprehensive map of corruption throughout Palmwood Shores' governance structure. "This isn't just about housing discrimination anymore," Marcus told Agent Dawson as they reviewed the financial evidence. "It's public corruption, conspiracy, and possibly RICO violations." Dawson nodded gravely. "Keep documenting everything. The Bureau is very interested now, but we need to build an airtight case before moving officially. These people have powerful connections." The conspiracy's urgency became clear when Marcus intercepted communications about an upcoming emergency foreclosure action against 6 properties, all belonging to minority families or coalition supporters. The coordinated legal action, based entirely on manufactured violations and excessive fines, would give Palmer Development the percentage of properties needed to force the community redevelopment plan forward. With the foreclosure hearing scheduled in just 2 weeks, the coalition faced their most critical deadline yet. They needed to expose the entire operation before families lost their homes to a corrupt system designed to exclude them. "Everything comes to a head at the next HOA meeting," Marcus told the coalition members. "That's when we present all our evidence to the entire community. It's time everyone in Palmwood Shores knows exactly what's happening in their name." What happens when corrupt officials realize they're being watched? When people stand together against systemic racism, can they overcome entrenched power? The confrontation between the Jacksons and Eleanor Harrington was about to reach its explosive climax. The Palmwood Shores Community Clubhouse had never been so crowded. Residents filled every seat, lined the walls, and spilled onto the patio outside where speakers had been installed to accommodate the overflow. News of the emergency foreclosure proceedings against 6 families had spread throughout the community, creating unprecedented interest in HOA activities. Eleanor sat at the center of the board table, her usual pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights, flanked by the HOA board members and the community's attorney. Behind them stood 4 enforcement officers in their pseudo-police uniforms, positioned strategically around the room. Marcus and Ayana entered together, followed by the coalition members walking as a unified group. They had prepared meticulously for this confrontation, each person carrying specific documentation and prepared to speak on different aspects of the discrimination they had uncovered. Eleanor called the meeting to order, with barely concealed irritation at the unprecedented attendance. "We have a full agenda tonight, primarily concerning the enforcement of community standards and necessary foreclosure actions against properties in persistent violation," she announced, avoiding eye contact with the coalition members. "Due to the sensitive legal nature of these proceedings, there will be no public comment period." Murmurs of protest rippled through the crowd as Eleanor continued distributing packets to board members containing foreclosure documentation for 6 properties. The first case involves 37 violations at 4328 Palm Harbor Drive, currently owned by Walter and Janine Thompson. Eleanor stated, referring to one of the few other black families in the, quote, community. The accumulated fines and legal fees total $22,600, triggering our automatic foreclosure provision. As she proceeded mechanically through the list, Marcus noted that every targeted property belonged to either a minority family or a coalition supporter who had spoken against discrimination. The pattern was unmistakable even to previously uninvolved residents who exchanged concerned glances as the list continued. When Eleanor finished presenting the foreclosure cases, she immediately moved for a board vote without discussion. Before the vote could proceed, Ayana rose from her seat, walking confidently to the center of the room. "Point of order," she stated clearly, her teacher's voice projecting without need for amplification. HOA bylaws require a homeowner response period before any foreclosure vote. Eleanor's face tightened with barely controlled anger. "We've modified procedures for efficiency. Security, please escort Mrs. Jackson back to her seat." As two enforcement officers moved toward Ayana, she calmly retrieved a document from her folder. "I have here the certified HOA bylaws, notarized and legally binding, which cannot be modified without a 2/3 community vote. Section 7.3 specifically guarantees homeowner response rights before foreclosure proceedings." The officers hesitated, looking toward Eleanor for direction as Ayana continued. "I also have documentation of a disturbing pattern that every resident should be aware of before voting." She projected a simple graph onto the screen, showing HOA violations by resident demographics. Minority homeowners represent 11% of this community, but have received 72% of all violations in the past year. The average fine for white homeowners is $87, while minority homeowners average $462 for identical violations. Residents began whispering among themselves as Eleanor frantically signaled to cut the projection. "This is inappropriate and potentially libelous," she declared, her voice rising. "Security, end this unauthorized presentation immediately." As the officers approached, Ayana Marcus stood, his calm presence commanding attention. "Before you take another step, you should know everything being presented is thoroughly documented and verified by legal counsel. Interfering with this presentation could constitute obstruction of justice in an active federal investigation." The mention of federal investigation froze the room. Eleanor's face paled visibly as Ayana continued methodically, presenting evidence of discriminatory enforcement. She displayed side-by-side photos of identical property conditions receiving vastly different enforcement responses based solely on homeowner race. The presentation culminated with documented connections between Eleanor Palmer Development and the planned luxury resort that would replace their homes. "This isn't about community standards," Ayana concluded. "It's about forcing specific homeowners out to facilitate a commercial development that's already received preliminary county approval." The meeting erupted into chaos as residents shouted questions and accusations. Eleanor repeatedly banged her gavel, demanding order, while refusing to address the evidence presented. The careful facade of community standards had been stripped away, revealing the naked discrimination beneath. As the meeting disintegrated into arguing factions, Eleanor abruptly declared the session adjourned without completing the foreclosure vote. The board members retreated quickly through a side door surrounded by security. Coalition members circulated through the crowd, distributing documentation packets to shocked residents seeing the evidence for the first time. The confrontation had succeeded in preventing the immediate foreclosures and exposing the discrimination to the broader community, but Marcus knew Eleanor wouldn't surrender easily. He watched her huddled in intense conversation with the HOA attorney in the parking lot, her gestures becoming increasingly agitated as residents approached with questions about the evidence presented. The real confrontation came 90 minutes later. Ayana had remained at the clubhouse, answering residents' questions, while Marcus secured their documentation. As she walked alone to her car in the dimly lit parking lot, two enforcement officers intercepted her, including Dwayne Miller with his known violent history. "You need to sign this violation acknowledgement immediately," Miller demanded, thrusting a document toward her while his partner positioned himself to block her path to the vehicle. "The board has authorized immediate remedial action for your unauthorized presentation tonight." Ayana recognized the intimidation tactic and calmly activated the recording function on her phone. "I'm not signing anything without legal review. Please move away from my vehicle." Miller stepped closer, invading her personal space. "This isn't optional, Mrs. Jackson. Either sign now or face immediate sanctions, including property liens." When Ayana raised her phone to record the interaction, Miller suddenly slapped it from her hand, striking her face in the process. No unauthorized recordings of enforcement actions, he snarled, as Ayana's cheek reddened from the impact. What Miller hadn't noticed was neighbor Diane Reynolds recording the entire interaction from her car across the parking lot. Ayana immediately called Marcus, her voice shaking but controlled. "Marcus, I need you at the clubhouse parking lot now. The enforcement officers are blocking my car and just struck me." Marcus had been meeting with Agent Dawson at a cafe nearby, discussing the evidence presented at the meeting. Both men immediately rushed to the scene, arriving to find Miller and his partner still threatening Ayana beside her car. Her cheek was visibly swollen, her normally composed demeanor replaced by barely controlled fear. Federal Agent Dawson announced, displaying his credentials. "Step away from the woman immediately." The officers hesitated, clearly assessing whether to comply. Marcus's focus narrowed exclusively to Ayana, noting her disheveled appearance and the redness spreading across her cheek. His SEAL training had prepared him for exactly this scenario. Threat identification, proportional response protection of the vulnerable. Last warning, he stated with chilling calm. "Step away from my wife." Miller made a critical error in that moment, reaching toward his waistband, where a concealed weapon was poorly hidden beneath his uniform jacket. Marcus moved with the explosive speed and precision that had made him an elite special operator. Two swift controlled strikes neutralized Miller before his weapon cleared the holster. His partner attempted to intervene, receiving a precisely delivered counterattack that ended with him sprawled across the asphalt. Both men lay incapacitated but conscious on the ground, their weapons secured by Agent Dawson. The entire neutralization had taken less than 4 seconds. Neighbors attracted by the commotion emerged from the clubhouse phones, recording as police sirens wailed in the distance. Ayana sobbed quietly, the composed educator replaced by a traumatized woman whose sanctuary had become a battlefield. Marcus held her gently, his protective stance, making it clear that anyone approaching would face immediate consequences. Blood trickled from his knuckles, the only visible evidence of the lightning-fast defense of his family. As flashers illuminated the night, and officers approached with weapons drawn, Marcus kept his hands visible while maintaining his position between Ayana and potential threats. The confrontation had escalated beyond HOA violations and discrimination. Now it had become physical, with clear evidence of assault. The community's carefully maintained veneer of civility had shattered completely, revealing the violence that had always lurked beneath the surface of Palmwood Shore's discriminatory practices. 3 police cruisers converged on the clubhouse parking lot, officers emerging with weapons drawn, despite Agent Dawson clearly identifying himself and explaining the situation. When Sergeant Wilson approached, Marcus immediately recognized him as a regular golf partner of Eleanor's husband. Wilson ignored Agent Dawson's federal credentials and Diane Reynolds' video evidence of the assault against Ayana. Instead, he focused exclusively on the 2 men lying on the ground. "Hands behind your back," Wilson ordered Marcus, unholstering handcuffs. "You're under arrest for aggravated assault." Marcus complied without resistance, years of military discipline evident in his calm demeanor despite the blatant injustice unfolding. Ayana's protests and Dawson's attempts to intervene were ignored, as Wilson roughly secured the handcuffs. "These men assaulted my wife," Marcus stated evenly. "They were armed and threatening her when we arrived." Wilson continued mechanically, reciting Miranda rights, deliberately avoiding acknowledging Ayana's visibly swollen face or the witnesses gathering with phone recordings of both the initial assault and Marcus's defensive response. "Save it for the judge," Wilson responded dismissively. "We've had multiple complaints about you threatening community safety." The deliberate mischaracterization of events aligned perfectly with Eleanor's campaign to paint Marcus as unstable and dangerous. The coordinated nature of the response suggested the police had been primed to act against him at the first opportunity. As Wilson moved Marcus toward the cruiser, a chorus of neighbor voices rose in protest. "They hit her first," called Catherine Wilkins, her phone displaying clear video of the assault. "Those men attacked Mrs. Jackson before her husband arrived." Other residents joined in surrounding the officers with recording phones documenting the biased response. The overwhelming community witness presence created a dilemma for Wilson, whose planned narrative crumbled under multiple video recordings contradicting his assumptions. The situation shifted dramatically when Agent Dawson stepped forward, his federal credentials prominently displayed. "Sergeant Wilson, I'm officially informing you that these events relate to an ongoing federal investigation into housing discrimination and civil rights violations. Mr. Jackson acted in defense of his wife, who was assaulted by unauthorized individuals impersonating law enforcement officers." Dawson's authoritative tone and the mention of federal investigation created visible discomfort among the responding officers. When Wilson hesitated, Dawson continued, "Any interference with federal witnesses could constitute obstruction. I suggest you redirect your investigation toward the individuals who assaulted Mrs. Jackson." The standoff between local and federal authority created tension until Wilson's superior arrived at the scene. After reviewing multiple witness videos and consulting privately with Dawson, the lieutenant ordered Marcus's immediate release and the detention of Miller and his partner for questioning. The reversal revealed the fragility of Eleanor's influence when confronted with irrefutable evidence and federal interest. As paramedics treated Ayana's injuries and took statements from witnesses, a forensic team discovered unexpected evidence on the detained men's phones. Text messages directly connected them to Eleanor with explicit instructions to ensure the Jackson woman understands the consequences of her presentation. Additional messages revealed a coordinated campaign targeting specific coalition members with escalating intimidation tactics. The evidence created a direct connection between Eleanor and the physical assault, transforming the housing discrimination case into potential criminal conspiracy charges. Within hours, news of the confrontation spread throughout Palmwood Shores and neighboring communities. Local media arrived to interview witnesses, broadcasting portions of the attack footage and reporting on the federal investigation into housing discrimination. As the story gained momentum, residents previously silent about their experiences began contacting the coalition with additional evidence of discriminatory practices. The following morning, Marcus discovered Eleanor attempting to leave the community with multiple suitcases loaded in her vehicle. His SEAL teammates, still conducting surveillance, notified both Marcus and Agent Dawson immediately. Law enforcement intercepted Eleanor at the county line, where a search of her vehicle revealed shredded financial documents, a prepaid phone containing incriminating communications with Palmer Development, and flight reservations to a non-extradition country. While Eleanor was being questioned, investigators executed search warrants at her home and the HOA office. They discovered extensive documentation of the discrimination campaign, including a color-coded map of Palmwood Shores, with minority-owned homes highlighted for priority enforcement, and a manual for the fake officers with explicit instructions for targeting specific residents. Most damning was a comprehensive development proposal from Palmer showing the planned luxury resort that would replace their homes once enough owners had been pressured to sell. The documents created an irrefutable paper trail connecting discriminatory HOA practices directly to Palmer's commercial development plans. Meanwhile, Marcus faced continued challenges from Eleanor's allies within local government. The prosecutor initially charged him with excessive force, despite clear evidence of self-defense and witness testimony supporting his version of events. Only after Agent Dawson intervened, threatening federal obstruction charges against officials ignoring evidence, were the charges reluctantly dropped. A grand jury was convened to investigate housing discrimination and corruption throughout Palmwood County, with initial testimony revealing a decades-long pattern of forcing minority homeowners out of desirable communities through coordinated harassment. The investigation expanded to include multiple officials who had enabled the discrimination through selective enforcement and deliberate blindness to complaints. As the grand jury proceedings continued, Ayana organized a community meeting at a neutral location where coalition members shared all their evidence, publicly creating transparency about the full scope of discrimination. The meeting drew residents from throughout the county, many bringing their own documentation of similar experiences in other communities. The widespread nature of the problem became apparent as patterns emerged across multiple developments, all connected to Palmer's expansion plans. During this period, Marcus faced relentless character assassination attempts from Eleanor's remaining allies. Anonymous rumors circulated about his military service suggesting PTSD-related instability and exaggerating the confrontation in the parking lot. His security contracts faced renewed cancellation pressure, and financial institutions suddenly required additional verification for routine transactions. The coordinated nature of these attacks confirmed the deep connections Eleanor had cultivated throughout local business and government. The most surprising development came when Eleanor's former assistant Rebecca Torres approached Agent Dawson with detailed records she had secretly maintained documenting discriminatory practices. Her testimony included recordings of Eleanor explicitly directing enforcement officers to target undesirable elements with specific reference to racial minorities. Torres revealed that her own family had faced similar discrimination in a neighboring community, motivating her to document Eleanor's actions while appearing to comply with her demands. Despite growing evidence against them, Eleanor's allies continued pressuring coalition members to withdraw their complaints. Catherine Wilkins received anonymous threats regarding her grandchildren's safety. Walter Thompson's financial practice lost institutional clients with connections to Palmer Development. Marcus discovered surveillance devices planted in his vehicle, evidencing continued monitoring despite the ongoing investigation. The intimidation attempts reflected desperation as the legal noose tightened around the conspiracy's architects. Agent Dawson provided security recommendations for key witnesses while expediting the federal investigation timeline. As grand jury proceedings neared conclusion, Marcus reflected on the systemic nature of the discrimination they had uncovered. What began as neighborhood harassment had revealed a county-wide network of corruption designed to maintain segregated communities and facilitate commercial development at the expense of minority homeowners. The fight had expanded beyond their individual home into a battle for fundamental housing rights. "This was never just about us," he told Ayana, as they reviewed testimony transcripts. "It's about every family that was forced out before we arrived, and every family that would have faced the same discrimination if we hadn't fought back." Ayana nodded solemnly. "And every child who grows up believing certain communities aren't for people who look like them." The grand jury's decision would determine not only Eleanor's fate, but the future of housing rights throughout the county. The Jacksons and their coalition had exposed the conspiracy, but permanently dismantling the discriminatory system would require fundamental changes to how communities like Palmwood Shores operated. Justice hung in the balance as they awaited the grand jury's findings. The press conference held on the county courthouse steps marked a watershed moment for Palmwood Shores. State Attorney General Melissa Rivera stood flanked by federal officials as she announced comprehensive findings of the 3-month investigation. "Today, we are filing charges against 13 individuals involved in systematic housing discrimination and public corruption in Palmwood County," she announced to assembled reporters and community members. These charges include violations of the Fair Housing Act, conspiracy wire fraud, public corruption, and in some cases, criminal intimidation and assault. Eleanor Harrington faced 27 separate counts, carrying potential sentences totaling over 30 years. Jeffrey Palmer and 6 Palmer Development executives faced similar charges, along with 4 local officials, including Police Captain Taylor and Judge William Harrington. The investigation had uncovered evidence of housing discrimination extending back nearly 2 decades, affecting hundreds of minority families across multiple communities. This case represents one of the most comprehensive housing discrimination conspiracies we've documented in this state. Attorney General Rivera continued. The systematic targeting of minority homeowners through coordinated harassment, selective enforcement, and intimidation created a modern form of housing segregation that violated fundamental civil rights. The Attorney General's announcement included immediate dissolution of the Palmwood Shores HOA board and appointment of a court-supervised administrator until new elections could be held. All pending violations and foreclosures were suspended pending review by an independent panel. The early morning arrests of Eleanor Harrington and her co-conspirators sent shockwaves through Palmwood Shores. FBI agents led Eleanor from her home in handcuffs as neighbors watched in stunned silence. Similar scenes played out at Palmer Development headquarters and the homes of implicated officials across the county. The coordinated raids secured extensive evidence before it could be destroyed, including offshore account information and communications documenting the conspiracy's full scope. In the aftermath, Marcus received an unexpected invitation to join a newly formed Community Safety Oversight Committee charged with establishing ethical guidelines for security practices in homeowners associations throughout the Prague County. His military background and security expertise made him an ideal candidate to help prevent the creation of future unauthorized enforcement groups. Meanwhile, Ayana received formal apologies from the Palmwood Preparatory Academy School Board, along with a promotion to department chair and compensation for the professional harassment she had endured. The board's statement acknowledged the unacceptable influence of external pressures on educational decisions and committed to protecting faculty from similar interference in the future. The community began healing through a multicultural celebration organized by coalition members. Families from throughout Palmwood Shores gathered in the community park sharing food, music, and stories that celebrated their diverse backgrounds. Neighbors who had remained silent during the discrimination campaign approached the Jacksons and other targeted families with apologies and commitments to vigilance against future injustice. "We should have spoken up sooner," Catherine Wilkins addressed the gathered residents. "Our silence made us complicit. Never again will we allow our neighbors to face discrimination while we look the other way." The rebuilding process included formation of a new neighborhood association based on principles of inclusivity and transparency. The association's bylaws explicitly prohibited discriminatory enforcement and required demographic monitoring of violations to prevent targeted harassment. Marcus served as an advisor during the drafting process, ensuring security measures remained appropriate and legally sound. The investigation's most shocking revelation came during Eleanor's bail hearing, when prosecutors presented evidence that she had actually been blackmailed by Jeffrey Palmer into implementing the discrimination campaign. Financial records revealed Palmer possessed documentation of Eleanor's involvement in financial fraud at a previous development company. His leverage had transformed her from accomplice to enforcer, explaining her increasingly desperate tactics as federal investigation loomed. The discovery added complexity to residents' feelings about Eleanor, but didn't diminish the harm her actions had caused. The final piece of the conspiracy emerged when investigators discovered Palmer Development's true motivation for targeting that specific section of Palmwood Shores. Archaeological surveys had identified a historic black cemetery beneath the proposed construction site dating to the early 20th century, when the land contained a thriving African-American community before residents were forcibly displaced. Palmer's development plans would have permanently erased this historical site, literally building luxury condominiums atop erased black history. The revelation created a powerful metaphor for the continued displacement of black communities that the discrimination campaign had perpetuated. Community members voted overwhelmingly to create a memorial garden honoring the historic cemetery and the displaced community it represented. The garden would include educational displays about both the historic displacement and the recent discrimination campaign, ensuring future generations understood the neighborhood's complete history. After long discussions about their future, Marcus and Ayana decided to remain in Palmwood Shores, despite the trauma they had experienced. "Leaving would give the final victory to those who wanted us gone," Ayana explained to coalition members who questioned their decision. "This is our home and we've earned our place here." Marcus nodded in agreement. "Sometimes the most important battles are the ones you fight not just for yourself, but for those who come after you." Their commitment was affirmed when a black family purchased the home next door, the first minority family to move into Palmwood Shores, since the discrimination conspiracy had been exposed. Marcus and Ayana welcomed them with a neighborhood gathering symbolizing the community's transformation from exclusion to embrace. As residents mingled on their lawn, Marcus observed the profound changes their stand against injustice had created. Property values remained stable despite Eleanor's fear-mongering about diversity. Children played together regardless of background. Neighbors engaged across racial lines with genuine interest and respect. The system designed to separate them had ultimately brought them closer together through their collective resistance. Was it worth it? Ayana asked quietly, as they watched their transformed community. Marcus took her hand, nodding toward their new neighbors and the diverse gathering on their lawn. "Look around," he replied simply. "They tried to break us, but instead they made us stronger. That's always worth fighting for." What would you do if faced with discrimination in your own neighborhood? Would you have the courage to stand up against powerful forces trying to drive you from your home? Let us know in the comments. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more true stories of justice triumphing against overwhelming odds, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing against discrimination makes a difference. Thank you for joining us on this journey from injustice to transformation. Remember, change begins when ordinary people refuse to accept extraordinary wrongs. This story illustrates powerful truths about confronting systemic racism and discrimination. First, injustice thrives when cloaked in seemingly legitimate structures like HOA regulations and community standards. These systems become weapons when enforced selectively against minorities. Second, standing against discrimination requires both courage and strategy. Marcus and Ayana succeeded because they combined moral conviction with methodical documentation, coalition building, and legal expertise. Third, corrupt power structures depend on isolation, breaking people down individually rather than facing united resistance. The coalition's formation transformed individual vulnerability into collective strength. Fourth, institutional racism operates through networks of power that protect each other. From HOA leadership to police, school boards, and business connections, these systems interlock to maintain exclusion. Fifth, true justice requires more than individual confrontations. It demands systemic reform. The community transformed because they addressed root causes, creating transparent governance and accountability measures. Finally, the story demonstrates that fighting discrimination isn't just about personal vindication, but about creating space for all who come after. When the Jacksons welcomed new black neighbors, they completed a circle from exclusion to inclusion, breaking patterns of discrimination that had persisted for generations. Their struggle transformed not just policies, but hearts and minds throughout Palmwood Shores. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in your neighborhood or workplace? What did you do? Speak up or stay silent? The hardest battles often create the most important changes, but they require courage and community support. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about ordinary people standing against extraordinary injustice. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration to fight their own battles against discrimination. Comment below with your own experiences confronting racism. Your story might give someone else the courage they need. Remember, systems of discrimination depend on our silence. By speaking up, documenting injustice, and standing together, we can transform our communities just like Marcus and Ayana did. Thank you for joining us on this journey through darkness into hope. May we all find the courage to stand for justice when it matters most, and the wisdom to build inclusive communities where everyone truly belongs.